You are now tuned to BS3 Network. BS3 Network, changing the way you watch TV.
Welcome to another episode of Queen3 and King. I am your host, King Doc. We will get to my guest host and my fellow host queens here in just a moment. Today's episode is the participation coach with Molly Breazeale. She, in our pre-show meeting, she actually preached on me, so I offered her a love offering, and you'll see why momentarily. Looks like we lost the season queen, so we'll get her when she comes back. And just so I can make sure I got good audio and video, my introductions will start with the baby queen today, formerly known as Blake's mama, now firmly entrenched as Bronx's mommy. She also goes by Mama Lee and Lee. Talk to the people, queen.
Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday.
And y'all can see she has her Faith Evans hat on today. So I don't know I don't know if Biggie was in the building, but I think that's impossible, huh?
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. How devastating.
All right. And next, we have our educator queen. She goes by Meba TT. Talk to the people, queen.
Good evening. I was about to say good morning, but at work.
So y'all notice that every time she starts to talk, there's a 9 to 5 voice, there's an after 6 voice, and so she varies depending on the guest and whatnot, and depending on which hairstyle she's going with that day. So I guess we're getting the melodic tones of the crooner type today, Molly, just so you kind of know. This is not the voice we get every week, but, this is the one we're getting this week, okay?
But you forgot a voice. You forgot a voice.
Educator.
The voice for the men.
Oh, all right now.
Well, hey, I told you, Molly has a son that's 30 and single. If you impress her today, she might put in a good word,
Okay.
And you can tell by Molly's background, she got some change in her bank account. See, that's not a Zoom background. That's not a StreamYard background. That's real back there. All those books, she owns those. Okay, so. All right.
Hey, my sis mother-in-law.
You hear that, Molly? Hey, I hope you like the cornbread dressing over here. We don't do stuffing. You better get used to it.
We don't do that.
I got
it. All right, and last but not least, we have the seasoned queen. She is out north, almost in Oklahoma, just on this side of Texas. Again, she is the seasoned queen, known as Coco, Boney Maroney, Skinny Minnie, Darling Nikki, and the Glamma herself. Talk to the people, queen.
Hello, everybody. I hope you guys had a great day.
They said they did.
Well, wonderful.
All right, I'm getting I've sent out quite a bit of invites and stuff, so I got a lot of people saying, what time? Oh my God, there's some people who know Molly, and we'll get into that in just a second. I'm intentionally delaying my introduction with her. They know Molly, so they're texting me saying, wow, for real, you're kidding. So I wish I could share my text with you as well as the chat. And to prove that, Molly, check out this right here. This chat.
Oh my goodness.
She knows Kevin. He goes, hey there, Ivan and Molly. What's going on, Kevin? Good to have you tuning in. My cousin Justin, this is another gentleman, Molly. Remember, this is my cousin, but he's in the financial sector and he's also in management and whatnot. So this material suits him perfectly fine. And also my next guest, she used to work at the same location where you and I met. She is now a realtor. And when I say she is an up and comer, and one of the reasons why I wanted to include her is because I see her owning her own agency one day, her own firm one day. So
Go
that's why I
ahead,
wanted
Rashida.
yeah, she's sharp. She's sharp. And then I don't know who
Thank
the
you,
Facebook
Rashida.
user is, but give Facebook permission to be able to publish your name so we can give you proper credit. It must be somebody that we're related to, I guess, because they said hi fam, but our community called everybody fam.
Right.
Molly, we got cousins everywhere, okay? So that doesn't mean they blood cousins. That just mean that's what we call them, okay? And so you've heard her name. I've said it, 50 times already in the broadcast. This is the participation coach. Molly, say hello.
Hi, everyone. And Ivan, thanks so much for inviting me. I'm not sure I know what I'm in for this evening, but I'm game.
I love it. I love it. And Molly, I typically do introductions of people and give their bios and that kind of stuff, but I intentionally, especially because of our pre-show meeting, I want you to do your introduction, your bio, your background, because I think it'll serve us better here. Okay. And plus, I want people to get used to your cadence and hearing how you kind of get down, right? So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background first? Okay.
So, goodness, where do I start? My first job out of college, I went to work for Delta Airlines. And I felt so darn lucky to get that job. And I hadn't been there more than, I don't know, maybe about a year. And there was a fuel crisis, and all the airlines were starting to lay off people. And my neighbor lived next door. She worked for Eastern. And she came home one day and she said, Molly, I got a pay cut, 7% pay cut in my paycheck, and nobody told me it was coming. She said, you just wait, folks at Delta. It's going to happen to you too. Well, it didn't happen. I got a note in my paycheck at Delta that said the employees at this company want to buy their company a jet. Boeing 737. Would you like to contribute to this airplane? Yes or no? How much would you like to contribute? Would you like that automatically payroll deducted? And so I sat there in the crew lounge all by myself, no supervisor looking over me. I filled out that piece of paper and I said, I may be a college kid, but I know what's happening. And long story short, the employees at Delta at that time raised enough money to buy a jet.
Wow.
Now, I remember the day it rolled out of the hangar in Atlanta. And I had tears in my eyes. Now, I probably didn't contribute enough to buy a nut or bolt or I don't know, not a lot. But I felt like I was part of something bigger than myself. I felt really involved. And I start with that story tonight, as I start with that story so many times, because part of the reason why I wrote the playbook goes back to that experience, because I learned something. I learned that companies, it doesn't matter how big they are, if they involve people in decisions, there's a phrase, people support a world they help create. And I have never forgotten that. So part of the reason I've worked at Delta, I've worked at Nationwide, I had a consulting career. I've taught Dale Carnegie training. I taught fierce conversations training. I've written leadership curriculum. So after all these years, and watching all the things that are changing in the workplace right now, it was really the reason why I sat down and said, I got to do something. Because I'm hearing so many companies say, well, we're going to decide if people are going back to the office, and we're going to decide this, and we're going to decide that. And I'm thinking, why in the world would you do that without getting everybody involved in the process?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a new day. So it's really why I wrote the playbook. I think three things should every employee has a right to know: their purpose, how does their job contribute? They have a right to make decisions that impact their job every day. And they have a right to come to work and grow and develop and get better. And so when I think about my career, it doesn't matter if I worked for a big company like a Delta or a Nationwide, or I've been an independent consultant on my own.
Mm.
I've just never forgotten those lessons. And so much more can be accomplished when we get everybody involved.
Mm-hmm.
Right. All right, wonderful. And that's, let me say this. This is something that my sisters have heard me tell guests all the time. And that is, the more notes I take when y'all are talking, the greater the show is going to be, because it makes me deviate from my sort of planned out conversation, and we get to some authentic, genuine conversation, So before we go on, Molly, and talk about how you and I met, which leads us to here today, let me get a few comments from the chat room. So Rashida, we introduced her earlier. She just simply came back with the, hey, everyone. Our auntie here, and this is the one we got to be careful of, Molly, because she's
Yes.
I have to filter her comments before I publish them here. But I think she'll behave today. She goes, greetings to my beautiful family. We got our guy H-Rap, Mr. Williams here, says, good evening, everybody. He is also a fellow podcaster and owns a network of his own, and he's out of the Chicago area as well. We got Mr. Brian Snowman in the building. He goes, good evening, everyone. He also is a fellow podcaster.
Hello.
Does a show on this network every morning. And then we have Mr. Ben Suttereth the third, who put the BS in BS3 network. He says, thank you, Molly, for getting that joke. See, sometimes people don't know how funny I am, but thankfully we got people like you who can illustrate that for them. He says, good evening. Okay, so that brings me. I'm not what? I'm a professional. And that really, so again, that brings us back to Molly and talking about how we met. But before, let me reset again. She is the participation coach, and she's authored a book, The Participation Playbook. And I'm going to get to how I received that book and some of the differences in how I received that book versus some other books some authors have sent me. But before we go there, I want to talk about how Molly and I met. And this was, this had to be at least 8 years ago now, at least, maybe as many as 10. I don't know if you remember the year you were at the organization. Molly and I promised each other we're going to try not to say the name of the organization, just in case, even though there are some people already in the chat room who know, and they were there too. But we met there. And you know how it is being employees, my sisters and our listeners, viewers, you know how it is when you go to training at a company, you're thinking, okay, here goes some more. Remember I said Ben put the BS in BS3, well, there's a lot of BS in training too, right? So of course I went in, even though I was in management, I went in still saying, okay, is this going to be more training for the sake of training, or is this going to be good? And when I say, Molly probably had to tell me during breaks and stuff, will you please just go to break and we'll talk when you come back? Because me and Molly was like, through every break, we chopping it up, I'm like, yeah. So from a participation standpoint, I was all in. I can't remember if the training was Fierce Conversations or something else. Okay. Because I heard you say between our pre-show meeting and some of the stuff you said in your intro, I'm hearing a lot of things that I heard. So I'm like, okay, I'm not sure which training we had. But anyway, I'll yield the floor and let you talk a little bit about what you remember in that first meeting with the great King Doc. This was before I was King Doc, right? I was a king on the inside, but not on the outside. and kind of how it led us there. In other words, how you met the powers that be in our organization and some of the things they told you that they wanted and how you coached them to realize this is what you should want and those kinds of things.
Well, it's funny because I do remember when Ivan was in that particular training class. And Mika, if you're in training or education, there's nothing worse than a room full of hostages, right? And so I always would think about in advance, yes, here's my material, but how do I make it meaningful for them? In other words, when I'm gone and we packed up the books and go home, what are some things I hope they take away? So as I looked out over the room that day, there's Ivan, and he's talking to people, and he's got a smile on his face. And, I wrote a playbook because I think the word is important. He came to play. He didn't just sit in the chair. He brought his head and his heart. And it was, if I'm going to be here today, I'm going to put myself in this experience. And I think that's what we all want to do. We want to experience something that feels real and relevant and useful. So even though I taught the class called Fierce Conversations, how to have the courage to step into conversations that really matter, the word that's always been in my mind is, how do I make it meaningful? And if you think about that word meaningful, if you break it down for a second, it's first, well, what does this mean to me? How can I use it? What's significant about it? And then it's not meaningful. We don't add the fullness until I hear what it means to you, Nikki, or to you, Lila, or to you, Ivan, or anybody else. So meaningful conversations say, I know what it means to me, but it's not meaningful until I can get people to participate and share their thoughts and ideas. And if you think about the word meaningful, it starts with 2 letters. What are they?
Me.
Meaningful starts with me. I've got to stop and think about it. So I met Ivan at an organization that I really believe had their hearts in the right place. They had hired a new leadership team and some great talent. And honest to goodness, in working with that leadership team, their goal was to really make a change, to really help people feel excited about coming to work again. The environment that they've been working in had been, I don't know if it had been toxic, but it sure wasn't a great place to go to work every day. So the new leadership team had a goal. We want people to be excited about where they work. But what was interesting, what happened over time was, let's just say, for example, there was a pretty big project. The leadership team identified they needed new software. They were going to help this team. They needed to upgrade and update the software, what people were using every day to do their jobs. And I understand this. When you have a project, you want to do the best job you can. So people on the leadership team, boy, they set right out to make these decisions. And they brought something in and they were so excited about it. But guess who didn't get included in making some of those software decisions? Any guesses?
The employees.
Yes, ma'am. So they called me up as a leadership team about 6 months later, and they said, Molly, we don't know what's going on. We've done all these things. We're trying to make this a better place, but we're not getting any traction. So I said, well, let me come in. Let me talk to some frontline folks. Let me see if I can figure out what's going on. And what I heard was, why didn't they ask us to help design this? Because it's still 7 clicks to get to the letter I need, or it's this, or here's a workaround that don't work no more. And so that's kind of funny how I'm sitting here getting an earful. So the leadership team calls me, Molly, tell us what's going on. Well, what do you think? Do you think the leadership team liked what I had to say?
No,
ma'am. It was shoot the messenger, at least a little bit, but I understood. Because what is your first reaction when you hear something you don't want to hear?
Defensiveness.
Defense.
Yes, hardwired for defensiveness.
And sometimes the more the more higher performer you are naturally, the more defensive you get when you hear a criticism.
Yes, because you knew you could have made that better.
Right.
You had ideas and nobody asked you for them. So when that leadership team, when we finally talked them off the ledge, we went about things a little bit differently. And I got to tell you, I remember a day, it was quite a while later, I went back for a visit and I got off the elevator. Somebody met me at the elevator. He goes, come and look. And in the training room, one of the training rooms, the leadership team had let this group set up a series of desks, create their own darn workflow. It was absolutely amazing. Now, what really changed? Just the conversation. They just started inviting ideas and getting people involved. And it was like a rocket ship.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no. That's good. No, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. And Mika and Nikki and Lily, if y'all got questions or whatnot, because again, with your organizations and stuff, she may say something that triggers, man, I got a situation just like that. Don't be afraid to ask that question. And same thing in our chat room. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. And while we're on it, we had a couple of chats while she was talking. Raider Kev says, wow, great thought. And he said that right after the meaningful part that she was discussing. We have someone else in that says, hey, Queens, hey, King Doc, and welcome, Molly. Don't know who that is because the Facebook user. And then we have Keisha that says, good evening, everyone. So what was funny about that is she says, what kind of reaction do you think you get? And I said defensiveness. Well, the reason why that resonates with me is because, again, one of my old bosses is in the chat room, and, he ran an organization, right? And I remember one time I was a high performer, and so I was getting some critique. And I got crunk Ivan at that time. I'm like, y'all, I'm the best in here. Y'all coming, you sure? Because I'll walk out this door, And so he called me to his office. He goes, hey man, come here, let me holler at you. And he closed the door, And I was one of the only ones where he says, I don't care when you need to come see me, And so he says, listen, he goes, I'm running this claims department and I still get coached. He goes, I get coached by the CEO. I get critiqued by the CEO. He says, so coaching doesn't necessarily mean you're deficient at something. Sometimes when you get coached, it means you're worthy of the coaching because it's going to make a difference. And I know you have it in you, et cetera, et cetera. So that defensiveness is super real. And again, like I said, I see it a lot more from high performers sometimes than I do low performers, so to speak, So I wanted to get to how I received this book, and I'm going to put up an image of the actual book first before I go into showing you exactly the one that I received. Let's see if I have it. Okay, yeah. So that is the book from an advertising, the Participation Playbook, 3 Ways Smart Managers Make Work Better for All. You see the toolbox there because this is a toolkit. Now, I am always very quick to say that this, and let me put it like this, every time I look at this playbook or every time I conversate with Molly, I see how this is actually not just a business a playbook. This is just a conversation playbook. This is just a relationship playbook, right? No matter the type of relationship you have, there are tools in here that can help you in your everyday life, which is why during some of our advertising, I said, not only if you're an entrepreneur or a business owner or a department head, but if you're a mom, a dad, a sibling. And Molly, speaking of that, next, don't let me forget about when you were sitting at the table with your parents. Remember that conversation we had during our pre-show meeting? I want you to talk about that too, so don't let me forget that. But so it doesn't matter what walk of life it is necessarily, there's something in it for you. So when I got my playbook in the mail, because again, once I invited her, she was like, okay, I want to make sure you have a playbook and you can see it. And what you see there is a handwritten card with it, right? And I want to read that to you just so you can kind of know, okay? And it's going to bring up something as well in terms of how Molly operates. Okay, so she's handwritten letter, dated and everything. She goes, Ivan, I think of this book as a toolkit designed to help managers step back from the daily hustle for a moment. It doesn't take a great deal of time and energy to make work more meaningful for those we lead. This journey has been very spiritual for me. I look forward to our conversation. My best, Molly. Okay, and when I say the spiritual, when she says this has been a spiritual journey for me, when I say our pre-show conversation and I'm trying to pass out love offerings and I did I said, and I had to get in explaining to her what Black church was like. And I said, look, when the preacher says something good, we gonna comment. If you say something good, be prepared for some
Preach,
amen.
preacher.
See what I'm talking about, Molly? So there were plenty of those conversations. So again, that's another reason why Molly and I connected. And she said that to me in the pre-show. She goes, that's why we connected, because there's a spiritualness to us both. Okay. So Molly, I want you to talk about the story you told me when you were sitting at the table with your parents when you were a kid and there's this participation thing or lack thereof, right?
I don't know about you all, but growing up, my dinner table was more like a battleground. People were not really listening to each other. The conversations were kind of going like this, right? You know what I mean? One person's talking over here, the other person's trying to get a word in. And I have to admit, and sometimes I even get emotional thinking about it, there were nights when it got so contentious, somebody would get up and leave in tears. I hope that's never happened to you, but that was the experience I had growing up more times than not. And just coming from a very real place. I may have been a kid. I was probably still in grammar school, maybe fourth or fifth grade. But I knew right then, this is not going to work. It's not a good place to be. This is not people respecting each other. And when I grow up, I just have to say it. When I grow up, I don't want to have a family like this. I don't want it to be like this because it doesn't have to. And I think throughout my life, I didn't have a lot of adults in the room. I don't mean chronological age. I mean maturity. The maturity to do a couple of things. To realize, number one, that what you say and what you do impacts other people. And sometimes it leaves a mark. And also, sometimes your short-term decision is at the expense of a long-term reward. So I think maturity and being a good adult really comes down to, when I wake up every morning, I have this hourglass on my desk. Do you know what this reminds me of? One day at a time. I get so much time. And if I watch the sand go through the hourglass, I only got so much energy. one day at a time. And what I choose to do with this every day is either taking me closer to things I want, or I'm losing ground.
Yeah.
It's like a muscle. If you exercise your muscle every day toward what you want by spending your time and your energy in things that matter, you get stronger. But what happens if you don't exercise? It's not that you stay neutral, you get weaker. And so I think growing up as a kid, watching those conversations around the dinner table just made me realize there's got to be a better way. And I'll be damned, I'm going to find out how to do it. And so what I put in the playbook is something called CORE. And CORE stands for 4 words. And if you've got a pen, write them down. If not, when I think about every time in my life I've had to make a transition or make a big decision or come up with a different direction in life because things just aren't going the way I want. I think of these 4 things. CORE, the C stands for context. And I'll come back to context for a second. The O stands for outcome. The R stands for relationships. And the E stands for environment. So when you've got a decision to make, or when you're trying to help your employees make decisions, it's best to kind of dig into your CORE for a minute. And CORE starts with context. When I think about, well, I don't know about you guys, when you hear the word context, that's like, duh, I don't really think I know what that means. Anybody really feel like you know what context means?
Yeah, and it's sometimes I don't think the people talking to me know what context means, but but it should be basically what a subject pertains to, and how are you utilizing this?
Yes, it's kind of like looking at the landscape of things, right?
Yeah.
Well, think about this for a second. Context, I looked it up in the dictionary. I like to go back to the origin of words. Cone means width. Texture means weave. Your context is when you weave together your past, your present, and your future. It's that landscape that Ivan just talked about, the bigger picture. So when I got a decision to make, I time travel. The first thing my body does emotionally is goes back to think about, wait a minute, what has happened to me before that this might be like? Have I had an experience? And was it good or was it bad? When you think about context and going back in time to what something meant to you, it stood out because it had an emotional impact. Otherwise, you wouldn't remember it.
Right.
And that's important to think about this decision you're trying to make. Because sometimes what happened to you in the past is relevant, but my God, sometimes today it's not.
Right.
Sometimes we spend too much time looking in the rearview mirror. Which I don't know about you, but I sure don't drive my car down the highway looking at my rearview mirror. Sometimes we have to look at this decision we face and think about the future. Your context is really your timeline. And I like to call it your trend line.
Wow.
Are the things that you're doing now taking you, if I were to map them, if I were to look back 6 months, 3 months, last week, when you wake up and you're investing your time and your hard energy, is it taking you toward what you want or not?
Wow.
And that's that outcome. I got to compare, in this decision, as I think about it, how big is the gap between what's happening now, what I need to decide, And how far do I need to go to reach this outcome? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Kind of looking at these two things and putting them in perspective. Now, here's something I think is really true. We lie to ourselves. Because, honey, if it means I got to change something, I'm going to think twice.
Yeah.
Because all this right now is in my head.
Yeah.
But the minute I got to do something different, well, that's another story. I remember taking a big job at Nationwide, and I had told all my neighbors and friends, I am moving to Columbus, Ohio. Now, my mind knew that. I'd accepted the job. I'd signed the contract, right? And I was excited about it. I was going to get a big job and get a chance to do something I'd never done before. But honey, the day that United Van Lines truck pulled up in my driveway, and those boys had the audacity to come in and start putting my furniture on that truck, I went, oh my God, I am moving to Columbus, Ohio. There was this new level of things have changed. I'm going to have to change.
That one right there.
Only two things that we can do to change our behavior. And that's in what we say and in what we do.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but it just comes down to that. There's no magic bullet. So I love LinkedIn and I see all these great infographics and training courses and do this, learn this. But that's all in your head. It's only when you're willing to apply those things, which means changing your behavior, that something changes as a result.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
And give me 1 second before we move into relationships, because the audience have made a couple of big time comments. The first one I wanted to point out was Snowman. He told me something that I'm going to turn back on him. He says, pull out the wallet, King Doc. And I'm going to tell my viewers, no, you pull out the wallet, because what you're getting here is worth money. Okay, so you pull out the wallet. Okay, we giving you some free game tonight. Raider Kev, of course, he said great thought. Someone just says hello. Okay, we got that already. Okay, Justin, again, financial sector. He goes, that's what I call best practice when I'm coaching someone myself. And then this is a great question. Magnolia Pearl Picnic says, is this book geared toward entrepreneurs as well? Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially if you plan on having an organization that you're intending to grow, and so there's a difference between entrepreneurship and self-employment. A lot of folks are self-employed that think they entrepreneurs, and you're not. So you need, is the company running itself or are you running it? Right. So that's the difference. Okay. But yes, for entrepreneurs, absolutely.
Shout out to Lakia. That's her business. Her new
okay, that's
business.
what's up, Lakia. All right. Oh, yeah, that's right. That sure is. Absolutely. And
We got support.
And she is someone who is absolutely, this is definitely information for you, because you will always continue to grow regardless of what you're doing because of who you are and how you do it. Okay.
Yep. Absolutely.
Vanita says, very true. What you do and what you say affects another person. She's kind of talking about that dinner table kind of analogy as well. She also says, I love the hourglass analogy. And then Raider Kev says, that's a great point. If you're not moving forward, what are you doing? And that is, you're not standing still. Standing still is not an option. That doesn't happen. You're either moving forward or you're going backwards, right? It's like you're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. Abstaining does not exist in that, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So again, Molly has talked about the context, which is that timeline or trend line and weaving together past, present, or future. And she's talked about the outcome. Now she's going to move into relationships and environment.
So participation, everything up until this point is really not participation, is it? Their thoughts and their feelings. But I haven't done anything yet. So the R stands for relationship. And I actually think there's two components to a relationship. There's the role you have, and the responsibility that comes with that role. And, think about it with kids. I remember when my son was in his teens, I didn't know who was living in our house. I mean, it was like he was possessed by somebody.
Yeah.
But what was true is that as he grew and was making more decisions for himself and had his own thoughts and his own beliefs, he's trying to assert who he is. My role had to change, didn't it? For the relationship to change.
Oh, that's 100%.
Because I can't keep telling him what to do and how to do it. If I want to raise a responsible adult that can take care of himself.
Wow. That's
and so huge. My role had to change. If that relationship was going to change at all, it had to start with what are the first two letters of meaningful?
Me. Yeah.
And had to start with me. Meaningful relationships start right here. And I had to dig deep. I had to tell the truth. A lot of the things I was telling my son he couldn't do were because I was afraid. So I learned to turn those things around. Emotion is just fuel. And I can use that energy for trying to control a situation, or I can use that same energy to try to create something new. So when I looked at Tyler one day, I said, Tyler, I was about to tell you you can't go to so-and-so. But here's the truth. And that phrase, speak the truth and the truth will set you free, or something along those lines, right? I said, here's the truth. I'm scared. I'm scared for your safety. I don't know.
That is so powerful, man.
And I don't know. Oh, Mom, I'm fine. But I persisted. I said, well, hear me out. Here's what's on my heart. But the decision's going to have to be yours. And for real? And so it was in that moment I realized if I want to have a meaningful relationship with my son when he's 19, when he's in college, when he's 30, part of the outcome I would tell you, and I've written this down on a piece of paper. I want my son to consider me as his trusted advisor.
Good.
And I had to stop and think, if that's the outcome I want in that relationship, what the heck do I need to be saying and doing now that creates that experience for him? Because it sure isn't pointing my finger in his face and telling him what he can and can't do. I think the same is true with employees and performance.
Yep.
When we can step back and say, yes, I blew up at you. I'm sorry. Let me step back and tell you what was really going on is I'm scared to go tell my boss about what just happened here. Talk to me. Tell me what happened and how do you think we can prevent this moving forward? All of a sudden, we're now in a different conversation that might have a prayer of changing something. And so when we think about making things more meaningful, I look at all this research and stuff about the workplace today. People don't come to work just for a paycheck. Two things is what am I earning and what am I learning? And I think this younger generation in particular, we live in a smartphone world. Think about this smartphone. I can connect with people from around the world anytime, anywhere. You got a question, I can have an answer. Like it is immediate, on demand, interactive, bi-directional, anytime, anywhere. I think people come into the workplace today and expect that. But what do they get when they come to work? Often they get a remote control. I'm going to tell you when to be here, what you need to do, how you're going to do it. How many of you out there would trade your smartphone for one of these?
Mm,
I don't want to work here anymore.
mm,
I want to work in an environment where there's this exchange of ideas. I've got experiences too. And so, again, it comes down to role and relationship. I got to think differently about my role today, whether I'm an entrepreneur with 3 people working for me or I'm managing a division. I was coaching someone. He was the COO for a big food manufacturing company. And this was even before COVID. And I remember having a cup of coffee with him at a break. And he said to me, Molly, I've got great people on my team. And I'd love to be developing their talent. But he said, quite honestly, stuff is coming at me so fast. And people are asking me for a decision when I haven't had time to think it through, that I'm just reacting. I'm not thinking about my role as people leader. I'm thinking about how do I put this fire out in front of me right now.
mm,
And he said, how do I step back? And again, I think it steps back and taking responsibility for your role and relationship to the people on your team or in your family or even with yourself.
mm.
Because we talk to ourselves all day long. I
Isn't that the truth?
I said, Ivan, it was one thing to teach Dale Carnegie training. I wrote the book, Leadership Training for Managers, with some trusted colleagues. For Susan Scott, I taught Fierce for 12 years.
Mm,
But there's something absolutely terrifying in this new role. It's my content. I'm not hiding behind anybody else. I'm trying to share my own experiences and hope that they're helpful.
yeah. Wow. Yeah, that was one of the things that you touched on that I wrote down is the uncertainty, because that uncertainty you even shared at the dinner table when you were young, and I remember in our pre-show, I talked to you about, imagine that girl that was sitting at that table who is now this Molly, and how far that had to come,
She doesn't even know her. I mean,
right.
that's been a lot of work to
Wow.
do. I remember one time my grandmother was sitting on her back porch and I had just taken this big trip. And my grandmother looks at me and she says, Molly Ann, you're just not like the rest of us. And I thought, oh, thank God. It was one of those moments where she did not realize what a great compliment she just paid me, because I've worked hard to tell myself the truth.
Right. Wow. And that's hard sometimes.
Focused on my goals, to change when I've needed to change and help others do the same. And then that final E is environment. And that can be your physical environment. This sits on my desk for a reason. Am I likely to remember this every day when things get busy?
Yeah. Curious George sits behind you for a reason,
George
right?
sits behind me to remind
that's not
me
accident.
to stay curious.
Yeah.
So I, in my environment, try to surround myself with things that remind me to, action. We either getting traction or we're being distracted. And how many times have you sat down to do something important and said, oh, let me just check my email first?
Every day, all
or
day.
let me go make this phone call, or I better go get a glass of tea, or I need to, well, I'm reading a great book right now. It's called Indistractable. And he says, pay attention to the thing that you're about to do when you get distracted. Because that's the truth. You're trying to avoid doing something hard.
Wow.
I love that. So I'm still learning, and our environment has a million things every day that'll try to distract us.
Yeah, love it. Love it. And again, that's another, remember, we talked about, sometimes when people hear this topic, they're thinking business, corporate, but it's so personal, because think about relationships and the things or the people that are distracting us from being who we need to be. And that contributes to our environment and who we're allowing in our circle and things of that nature. We see this, those of us who are on social media and 3 or 4 different platforms, we see and hear this all day, where people are giving us the same advice that Molly just gave you. Be careful at your environment and what you set up and who and what you allow to distract you. And a couple of comments. Let's see, we have a Facebook user. I can't tell who that is. Y'all may be able to see, but they said, totally agree. My favorite job was Chick-fil-A because of what I learned from the establishment. On the surface, it's a fast food job, but it's really a customer service training and perfect business model to observe. Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
That's CJ.
Okay, cool. And he goes, okay. And he says they come for the chicken, but the customer service, consistent taste, and quick moving lines are what makes repeat customers out of people.
Right.
That's so true. So true.
And then the other CJ says, I know I'm late, but what's good, y'all?
Hey, CJ.
Let's see. Raider Kev says, man, the nuggets just keep coming. I'm definitely writing it down. So again, Raider Kev, I knew that would be the case. And this is one of those kind of programs that I'll have to go back and watch again because of so much good information. And in fact, when I take notes as if I'm going to have to regurgitate this information, right? The same way I listen in church is the same way I listen here, in the types of notes I take, because I want to be able to bless somebody else with the information I was blessed with. And then we got Jawbreaker. His name is Jawbreaker, not because he's a fighter, Molly. I nicknamed him Jawbreaker in high school because he missed a day of football practice, and the coaches knew we were close. And they said, "Where's McCraney at, Dawkins?" Because they were upset because he was a good player. He was our starting fullback. "Where's McCraney at, Dawkins?" I said, "He in jail, coach." They said, "In jail? What happened?" I said, "He got caught stealing Jawbreakers at 7-Eleven. So there, from then on, and that was completely made up. From then on, his nickname was Jawbreaker.
You're still friends after that?
Really?
The best of friends. Matter of fact, he'll tell you that, he goes, most of your close friends wanted to fight you when they first met you, So, yeah. He says, great show. Good to have you on board, Jawbreaker. So again, we're almost out of time. We got about 5 minutes or so left. Lily, Mika, Nikki, did y'all have anything that y'all wanted to ask specifically or comment on?
No, well, I guess just one comment. I think what really stuck out to me is her talking about how the corporation she went to do the training, they never talked to the employees. And that's something that you hear about all the time in management. They will come to us and be like, why aren't they talking to us? We are the ones doing the work each day. We can tell them how to do it better than somebody that hasn't done the job in 20 years. Yes. But you're trying to, reinvent the wheel, so to speak. So that really stuck out to me.
Yeah. And Molly, actually, because of that training and that conversation she had with the powers that be, I got this title at the organization I was at called SME, which stood for Subject Matter Expert. And as a result, I got to travel to Columbus, Ohio and Phoenix, Arizona, and start participating in some of the software programs we were rolling out and stuff like that, because they were like, that guy is good at that task. If we're rolling out something to support that task, he needs to be involved in it, And so when they were rolling stuff out, they would be like, and I don't know if Kevin is still on here, but he'll tell you, one day I made a decision about a software program that was rolling out that affected the entire organization. And I told him, pull the plug on the rollout. because this is going to break. I just noticed something, and he goes, you better be sure, because he goes, do you understand what you're asking me to do? And I'm like, yes, I do, but my marching orders were go see if you can break it. Well, guess what? I broke it the morning of the rollout, so I'm like, this is going to be disastrous. You need to pull the plug. And he's like, okay. And he called and he goes, pull it. We're not doing it, hold tight. We got some more checking to do. And about an hour, 2 hours later, he came to me and says, do you know what you just saved us? But it was because they took this training. They took the advice that Molly gave them. They gave us some participate. They made it more meaningful for us, and they trusted what we had to say, and it saved the organization a whole lot of heartache and probably a whole lot of capital.
Yeah, and I don't think we said amen loud enough when she even talked about having that vulnerability conversation with her son about like projecting your fears on what he was going through. So that was huge.
Right, but he told him what the deal was. She had to. I mean, think about that. We're supermen and superwomen to our kids. So we got to admit a weakness. Are you crazy? But it is the thing that you got to do to make it a more meaningful relationship, because like she said, it's not going to always be that type of relationship. It's going to evolve, and either you evolve with it or you're going to get left behind, and you're going to wonder, why don't I have a relationship with those grandkids that I so desperately wanted? And why don't I have a relationship with his new wife? And why don't I, you follow what I'm saying? So you have to evolve with it. So I think that was fantastic. And the spiritual piece of it, where she talked about the fear and the apprehension and the uncertainty. And she called this journey she said, this is my stuff. I'm not teaching Dale Carnegie stuff. I'm not teaching Susan Scott stuff. I'm teaching my stuff now. Yeah. And the fear and apprehension that came with that from a spiritual standpoint is huge. So I think, again, along with the other nuggets that Raider Kev talked about, that is another one. I knew, Molly, and I pre-show, I talked about the types of things that we were going to talk about. And I said, watch, I promise you, I'm going to tell you, we've got to have a part 2, because there's so many notes that I wrote down, so much information that I did not get to. For instance, let me give you another nugget. Things have changed. I'm going to have to change. Think about that for a second. Life is ever changing. There's only one thing certain in life, and that's
a podcast topic within itself.
In and of itself. That'll go an hour by itself. The world is changing every minute, every hour, every day, every week, every month, every year. And if you're not changing with it, the dinosaurs aren't going to be the only thing that's extinct.
Right.
Yeah. So, fantastic. I'm going to give you another one. Emotion is fuel. How are you going to use that energy? So I got a buddy who always says, don't let temporary circumstances cause you to make permanent decisions.
Yeah.
And he always talked about the emotions. He goes, don't let your emotions drive you. They're there for a reason. Some of it is a safety reason and things of that nature. So if you're getting emotional about something, you're supposed to be, but don't let it control you. It is just a signal for you, So I think that's good. It's fuel.
Yeah.
What are you going to use it for? Are you going to use it to pour on the fire, or are you going to use it to propel you forward?
And I think that's something I've shared, my mentor sharing with me when I first got into leadership, because I would be like, can you believe they said this to me? She's like, Alicia, take the emotion out of it. Take the emotion out of it. Now let's talk about it. Because it's not directed at you, it's directed at the situation. And I was making it personal. So
and I would kind of add to that, because I think you're right. It's your body doesn't lie.
Yeah.
And in that moment, if you're feeling something, I dare you to really try to get rid of it.
Yeah.
But if you channel it and realize, I maybe can't make it go away, but I can figure out a way to do something differently that is going to help me get traction, then we find that energy, that fuel, gets channeled into something far more positive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nikki, you've been quiet.
No, I'm taking everything in. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot to take
Good
in.
stuff. Good
It's
stuff.
really good. Yeah. Yes, it is. And especially with the part
Good stuff, Molly Ann.
especially the part where you was talking about your son, and with my situation with what we talked about prior to the show with my son having a mental illness and stuff, that I worried about him every time he stepped out the door.
Yeah.
You know, so I understand that. So I had to just let go and just let God cover him.
Yep.
And that was the hardest thing I ever had to do.
Oh, amen to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Again, the participation playbook. Molly had asked me about numbers and stuff like that before the show. Again, let me just say this: Queen3 and King. You know, we do a lot of on-air producing. And we'll pull back the curtains on you quick, right? You know, so I don't mind that kind of thing. I think it's good. It adds to the realism of not only who we are, but who our guests are, right? And again, there's a reason I had Molly on the show, you know, because I knew what she would bring to the table. And so she asked about numbers and things of that nature. Well, Molly, I'll tell you, I've been watching the numbers during this show. And when I say they are as high as any show that we've ever had, you know, in terms of live participants. And I know once we do some back end promotions, okay, that's an industry term for those of you who don't understand, we professionals here. Once we do some back end promotions, those numbers are going to show up even greater. So again, the book is called The Participation Playbook: 3 Ways Smart Managers Make Work Better for All. Molly, tell people how they can get a hold of you, how they can get a hold of the book, what they can do if they need. If they can say, hey, I'm going to my bosses and says we need to get her in there for some training, tell them how they can get a hold of you. And that
tell us.
Just go to Amazon.com. It's pretty easy. Amazon.com, just type in Participation Playbook and it pops right up. And I don't have to be in the book shipping business. So I really like that. And I also have a website. It's participationcoach.com. And there are some tools and coaching opportunities and those kinds of things around the website.
Is that how people can reach out to you to possibly get you in with their companies and things like that? You
can reach me, Molly, at participationcoach.com is my email. Okay. Send me a note.
Okay. All right. And I got in my copy, so you can either buy Molly's copies or you can buy my copy, and whatever she's charging, I'll add $10 to mine, and the reason why I'm charging more, the reason why I'm charging more is because it's been with King Doc, and I'm going to sign it. And this little personal note, you don't think this is more desirable? Okay, well, I
want Molly's notes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going
after the show.
Yeah, love it.
I love it.
Raider KF says that is so true. Emotions can definitely stop growth and cause bad decisions. Absolutely. So again, hopefully, you know, some of our viewers and whatnot have seen. Okay, wait a minute, I missed this comment. So Rashida says, "I'm going through that now, and it sucks." LOL. I think it's about her sons because she has 2 sons.
Oh, yeah.
She's a new diva granny and enjoying time with her grandson.
I think it was when we were talking about like employees.
Their
voice to be heard.
Possibly. Yeah. Or she may be in a situation where her voice is not being heard somewhere, you know. So but anyway, hopefully if you've heard this, if there's somebody who you know can use this information, whether it be from a personal or a business professional standpoint, please share the link with them. Let them know where they can go find it, things of that nature. Again, Molly, the participation coach. Coming up next week on Queen3 and King, we will have a very special guest. Okay, Molly, so I think I told you that this podcast, 2 years running, has won the award for most versatile podcast. Okay, here's one of the trophies that we won, right? So next week we are actually going to have an artist on. So I don't know if you're familiar with hip hop rap or anything like that, Molly. Probably not, but you should be curious, George, about this. But anyway, so this gentleman actually is an artist, and he actually drew the cover art for one of the dopest rappers of all time, Tupac, in his
Tupac.
in his All Eyes on Me album, and on Tupac's Machiavelli, The 7-Day Theory. And when you see this artwork, you're going to recognize it right away and be like, oh, that's the dude that wrote that, drew that. Yep, that's him. So again, if you've seen our social media and some of the pictures that we posted with regard to his artwork, you don't want to miss that next week. His story is fascinating. He has just recently moved from Compton, California, the heart of all that rap scene, and he now lives in the Dallas area. And when I say a down-to-earth guy, a spiritual guy, when I say we had a spiritual conversation a few weeks ago, that it's almost like you want an audience, because there's so much meat in the conversation that you're like, it should be more than just two people who benefit from this, you know? So I can't wait to have him on next week and tell his story. But hey, we're going to have final thoughts now. And we're going to start with the seasoned queen, work our way down, and then we'll let Molly say her goodbyes and final thoughts as well. Seasoned queen Nicole, it's on you.
First of all, Molly, I thank you for coming on and sharing your knowledge with us. It's great. It's some great information that you share with us, and I hope that you do come back again and for a second part 2. And that's to our listening audience, I love you guys as always. Have a great rest of your week and stay out of trouble.
All right, Mika.
To our listening and viewing audience, thank you so much for tuning in to Molly Ann or Mom, whatever happens.
Okay, Mom.
Thank you so much for those nuggets. You know, and like Ivan said earlier, it's not only beneficial for those who are in leadership positions, it's beneficial for those who are trying to have meaningful relationships, period. So we appreciate you for coming on the show.
All right, Lily.
Molly Ann, I hope you don't mind, because that is my name for you from here on out. Molly Ann, you should have said it. You shouldn't have said it. But thank you so much for joining us. It was just great to have you on. Learned so much, heard so much as it just that I can carry with me into relationships. Just like Mika said, it's not just about those corporate relationships and corporate, work that we have to work through, but you can carry that into your personal life. And we appreciate you for joining us. We appreciate you for pouring into us, because you definitely did that. We definitely need a part 2, because there's so much meat still on the bone that I don't think we even got to get to, because like I said, I was just it was things that was sticking out to me. I'm writing down the meaning of core. I'm thinking about, how to change my relationships with my children and to meet them where they're at, to just express that vulnerability. And it's so important. So thank you so much for joining us. Listening audience, y'all know. Thank you.
Yeah, just for things such as hostages versus participants, I can go 30 minutes on that. So, hey, one thing that I didn't get to, again, the organization that I was a part of, that she came in, they were looking to change the engagement, the culture, and we're trying to identify change agents and how those are important and all those sorts of things. But again, just to show that we don't always just get comments and things of that nature in the chat room. Again, text messages and whatnot. Somebody just texted, amazing podcast tonight. This was great for business and personal development. Excellent job.
True.
So again, I knew that would be the reception that we would get, because again, we're kind of silly on Queen3 and King a lot of the time, but I know we got some heavy hitters out there in terms of corporate America and entrepreneurship and leadership in their corporations, So, all right, Molly, it is on you. Final thoughts, ma'am.
I think work is personal.
Ooh,
I think we spend so much of our lives at work. Maybe that's the way we need to start thinking about it a little bit more. and that managers out there create conditions for people to make their best decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's true for parents
Mm-hmm.
and in relationships too. So you
Okay.
guys showed up to play tonight. You were all in.
Yeah.
And I really thank you so much, everyone,
Yeah.
for just letting me share some thoughts with you.
Yes, ma'am. Well, wait, we really appreciate you taking the time. We understand you're on the East Coast, so this is even an hour later for Molly. So she's going to have to get Curious George to bed pretty soon here.
I got a glass of wine waiting for me.
Oh,
I heard that.
Molly, I'm going to tell you, like I told our last week's guest, you don't have to wait to drink the wine. You can drink it on the show, you know, because guess
I
what?
heard that.
Mika does most weeks, so you're more than welcome to have your
I'm too
glass of
sleepy
wine.
tonight. I would have been sleeping if I would have had some wine. I had to get this wine.
So, Molly, we appreciate you again. We will definitely have you on again. Your time is not taken for granted. And when I said to Raider Snowman, and some of the other people in the audience that the information you're giving tonight is worth dollars, real dollars. You know, this is information that is good money is paid for. So she gave you some very good information today. So please support her. Go out and get that book, the Participation Playbook, and support her as she has supported us. And we will see you next week on another episode of Queen 3 and King.
Bye.
Are we smiling or what are we doing?
The Queen Bee has arrived.
You know. We'll show out then. So I'm gonna start with both of y'all's hands right here.
Look for my thumb.
Look for your thumb.
Like if you can see my thumb on this mic.